East Coast bias. We have a lot to discuss as it is a football extravaganza this weekend with college football playoff games on Friday and Saturday. I gave the boys a homework assignment. We'll see if they did their homework, and they're going to be on the nice list, not the naughty list, come this weekend. We got NFL games to break down, and our buddy Raheem Palmer's in the desert, so we got some NBA Cup to get to. Raheem Palmer, Joe House, John Jastremski, welcome in. If you're listening on a Ringer Gambling Show, welcome in on FanDuel TV. Raheem, right out of the gate, you're in Las Vegas. Wish I had money on Milwaukee. I know you did yesterday as they took down Oklahoma City in the NBA Cup. Before we get to all the football, you've been in Vegas. You're there right now. Set the scene, bud. What's it been like over the last few days?
Well, I actually had money on Oklahoma City Thunder. So, that was pretty rough for me. But, I pretty much broke even yesterday. The biggest thing is that my biggest amount of money has been on the under. And we've seen throughout all of these Las Vegas in-season tournament games, all of the games are going under. 6-0 to the under. If you go back to last year, you're talking about 10-2 since the quarterfinals. So these are almost like playoff games. And these teams are taking it very seriously. So I think it means a lot that LeBron James and Giannis Antetokounmpo were the first two players to win the in-season tournament and win the in-season tournament MVP. And I think it's going to be something as the years go by that players want to win because that's great company. But as far as the games themselves, they weren't very good, but hopefully it gets better as things go on.
House, would you say, and look, the Lakers won the NBA Cup last year. So as far as what it means for the grand stage of the rest of the regular season and the postseason, my answer would be absolutely nothing. I appreciated Mr. Ham, the assistant coach on the Milwaukee staff, saying to Doc Rivers, we are not going to be popping bubbly after winning the NBA Cup. So yes, Raheem, I think there is something to be said for joining elite company like LeBron and Giannis. Yeah, no doubt about it. But at the same time, I don't need my guys celebrating in Vegas in December like they won an NBA title in June, okay? So I appreciated that. But would you say, House, now that this is concluded, is this more positive for Milwaukee as far as what they've been able to do, getting Giannis going, Giannis basically saying, I'm going to attack the interior the way I did when I won an NBA championship a few years ago? Or is this, maybe Oklahoma City, this is a little cause for concern? If there was a takeaway out of one of those two, what was it for you more after the NBA Cup?
Yeah, I don't think that I would cast the Oklahoma City performance Tuesday night as a cause for concern. On balance, I like what I'll characterize as the propulsive effect of this particular tournament on teams that are on the come up. Like, the thing that Oklahoma City needs is reps on a big stage. We watched it last year. Dallas was able to handle them in the Western Conference Finals because they just don't have, the reps all together yet. And that's the difference to that game. The Bucks, what we saw was a maturity out of Milwaukee and a maturity out of the Lakers in the first year of this thing. And, we sort of wagered on which teams on the rise. This is part of why we like the Hawks a little bit. And then Milwaukee, took care of them in the semifinal. But I think it's like, it's an effective way for Milwaukee to show the NBA world that they figured out some of their early season problems, that they their improvement on defense might have stickiness. They're still 14-11, only a few games above 500, and we will see. They cannot afford any injuries whatsoever, that Milwaukee team. They can't, no injuries. But Oklahoma City, what they need is reps, and those were real reps under, playoff-like conditions. So I think ultimately it was like kind of good for both.
The interesting thing is that if you look at what Oklahoma City did defensively, they were still on point. They held the Bucks to 42% shooting, and the Bucks only scored a point per possession. It was the offense that lost that game, and they could not hit a three. 5 for 32 from behind the arc. Probably one of the worst three-point shooting games that I've ever seen. Now, the one thing I will say, and I think House brought this up, this is how they looked against the Dallas Mavericks. Suddenly they couldn't hit a three. So maybe this might implore them to add another score, to add more shooting, because it's pretty clear that they need more guys outside of SGA and Jalen Williams. And I know Chet isn't there, but they need much more scoring. Now, here's the interesting thing. I think these two teams, they played all throughout the in-season tournament. Everybody else was resting. You look at the Oklahoma City Thunder. They have to take on the Orlando Magic, and then they have to take on the Miami Heat on a back-to-back on Thursday and Friday. So you want to pick one of those spots and fade the Oklahoma City Thunder. And then also the Milwaukee Bucks, they take on the Cleveland Cavaliers on Friday. That's a good spot to fade the Milwaukee Bucks. So I think you want to fade these in-season tournament teams who made a deep run.
I think there's something to be said for that, Raheem. Obviously, the idea of playing a lot more basketball, kind of revving up the engines, and now having to bring it back, considering, hey, it's back to the grind of, 1 of 82. Fade opportunities indeed. But I was impressed by Milwaukee, and I was impressed by Giannis. Maybe a little bit better than I thought about 2 or 3 weeks ago, where it seemed like that team was destined for a nightmarish 2024-2025. Maybe they're not in the Cleveland-Boston camp as far as winning games, but I think they should feel better about things a month and a half into the year. Now, House, let's make the transition, the not-so-awkward transition, as we get ready for Week 16 in the NFL. And yes, we will break down all the games. We'll get to Thursday. We'll get to the 2 games on Saturday. The Sunday card leaves a lot to be desired, because that's what happens when you're cherry-picking games throughout the week. But Monday Night Football, we watched Atlanta and we watched Vegas. Atlanta was very fortunate. Defensively, they won the game. Point blank, end of story, won the game. I didn't know if Raheem Morris was going to have the stones to do it. But Raheem alerted us in our group chat yesterday, and I had a big fat smile on my face, because you guys know me. I watch a lot of college football. I'm an enormous Michael Penix fan. I love a lefty. I thought he was great down the stretch last year, leading that team to the national championship. And I was annoyed he got drafted by the Falcons, quite frankly, because I said, he's a guy who's ready to go. He's not a project the way I see it. He's older. He's ready. Get him out there. I want to see him play. House, I didn't have on my bingo card the idea that he would have to come in Week 16 to basically try and save the season for Atlanta, because Kirk Cousins is unplayable. But all in all, a must-have move for Morris and the Falcons. That's the way I see it.
I mean, that I agree, because I've been on these very airwaves talking about the Kirk Cousins performance for, 6 weeks now. And there was, a lot of conjecture out there amongst the NFL analyst community. Well, Kirk Cousins has been through rough spots before. And I think this one is different. Now, he may yet in this offseason, Kirk Cousins, get the rehabilitation that he needs and get strong again in his legs, but he isn't strong enough right now. He can't play NFL football because he's not physically able to move inside the pocket and stand it up and take any kind of contact whatsoever. And, it really did have the effect of basically eliminating the Falcons from the playoffs. They still have a pathway, and they have the good fortune of playing the Giants this upcoming week. But their best chance to make the playoffs now is definitely with Michael Penix. So to me, week or two too late, honestly, it would have been better to have seen him against the Raiders. Let Penix, if that's what you're going to do, get that guy seasoning, so that when, these games down the stretch are being played, he's got a little bit of the rust off. But by far, to me, the move that needed to be made, and I'm glad that they made it, Dream.
Yeah, they definitely had to make the move. If you watched that game on Monday night, Bill Barnwell had an interesting tweet. The Falcons faced 1st and 10 24 times on Monday night. They ran the ball 23 out of the 24 times. So they basically had Kirk Cousins out there, and they had training wheels on him like he was a rookie quarterback. And that can't happen. I mean, rookie quarterbacks they get a chance to throw the ball on first down. So it puts them in a tough spot. And if you look at Kirk Cousins, his numbers, they've just been absolutely abysmal. I mean, you're talking about a guy who is 30th in success rate in EPA per play since week 11. You're talking about a guy who has 1 touchdown and 8 interceptions. Like, that's not playable. And it's not just his Achilles. It looked like his arm is gone as well, because you saw some of the interceptions that he threw against the Chargers. He can't throw anymore. So it looks like the Falcons, they made a horrific decision to sign this guy for all of that money. But at the same time, they made a game-changing decision, a franchise-altering decision, to actually draft Michael Penix. Now, the problem I have with this is the fact that, how do you draft Michael Penix, put him on the bench, and then only play him one preseason game? And they only played him a couple series. In the preseason, he was 9 of 16, 104 passing yards, 56% completion percentage, and they felt like they didn't have to play him anymore. Now, if there's a good spot to bring in Penix, it's against this Giants defense. The Giants defense missing Dexter Lawrence, a Giants defense missing 3 cornerbacks. So I think Penix could probably look good this week, and then I think you can fade him in future games.
Yeah, I think that will ultimately end up being what happens with Atlanta. You guys know I'm invested in Tampa Bay. We got to bring these futures home because Sundays have not been kind to us. The futures, however, have been very kind to us. And hopping in on Tampa at plus 500 to win the division is seeming rather appetizing. Yeah, we'll have some thoughts on the Bucs and the Cowboys later on. Before we hit Thursday Night Football, Raheem, I was thinking about this watching the Vikings dismantle the Chicago Bears. And listen, I don't want to spend any time on the Bears. We know their story. It's pathetic. They fired the coach. Caleb Williams looks like a lost puppy. He needs coaching. He needs schooling. He's developing so many bad habits. I've spent already too much time talking about the Chicago Bears. Minnesota. What is the ceiling, you think, for the Minnesota Vikings this year? Because they're still facing an uphill climb to win the division. They have a path to go and win the division. And I don't want to spoil our cap for the Seahawks game, which we're going to dive into a little bit later on. Is Minnesota a team, because of their coaching, because of the way their defense is playing on the floor, where they can go and win a playoff game or two? Or are we looking at the exact Minnesota team we saw 2 years ago? See, I don't look at them that way. 2 years ago, they were fraudulent. They were pulling these games out of thin air. They were pulling these games out of their rear end. They're not doing that this year. They've beaten the snot out of a lot of teams. I think they're super well coached. I don't think they're going to the Super Bowl. I think Minnesota could win a playoff game or two. I don't think that's nuts.
I'm going to take it a step further. Minnesota can go to the Super Bowl.
Okay.
And it has nothing to do with Minnesota and everything to do with the fact that everybody who plays on the Lions is in the hospital. They have 21 guys on injured reserve. The Eagles, they have a good defense, but what is Jalen Hurts as a quarterback? I mean, we talk a lot about Sam Darnold not really being that guy, but what is Jalen Hurts at this time? So you got 2 teams at the top of the NFC who have a ton of question marks. And then you look at the Packers. I think the Packers are probably the team who has the best long shot odds in order to go to the Super Bowl. But if you ask me, the NFC is wide open. It would not surprise me if the Eagles, Lions, Packers, Vikings all went to the Super Bowl. And then you probably could include the Rams in that as well. And then also Tampa Bay is feisty. So I like, any one of these teams could win. And I think this is probably one of those years where it pays to take some long shots.
I like the way that Dream is thinking here. To me, I still have the Eagles a class above everybody else. I'm very sorry for all my good friends from Detroit about what has befallen that team, because they deserve better.
It stinks.
But, yeah,
I feel for the Lions fans.
That's all you
I feel
could
for
say.
the team. Just goes to show you never know how the injury luck house is going to pan out. They've got the bad end of it.
That's exactly right. But it looks like the way the playoffs are going to play out, the Vikings will play whoever wins the West. And we think that the Rams have an inside track. That's kind of a great game, right? First weekend of the playoffs, right? The 4 against the 5. And then the winner of that game will get, the 1 seed in the following week, we expect. And that would be, I think it's going to end up being the Eagles off the bye. And that is a jump ball kind of game. The one thing that concerns me with Minnesota, their pass defense, their secondary has been really vulnerable. We've seen teams over these last 4 or 5 weeks really rack up the yards against the Vikings secondary. So that would be an area of concern, but good for the Vikings and all the accomplishments of this season. It's like they really came out of nowhere.
We got a lot coming your way. We'll dive into that Vikings-Seahawks game. Fascinating. I think there were a couple of spots that just scream scream, smash spot. And I have two involving two teams that I think will be in the playoffs this year that I'm going to be all over come Sunday. We'll dive into that. But first, Thursday night when we come back, winner of this game is in the driver's seat to make the playoffs. Loser's going to sweat a little bit here. We'll dive into Broncos, Chargers right after this. Guys, really good Thursday night game. Fascinating Thursday night game. Denver, who has overachieved. They have been incredibly well coached. They have been incredibly fortuitous in a lot of these games. It was on full display against Indianapolis last week. Then you have the Chargers, who to me are a team that is trending in the wrong direction. Justin Herbert doesn't look right. You're seeing some cracks in the foundation in the last few games. Raheem just hit on that game they won against Atlanta that they would have never won in a million years if they weren't going up against Kirk Cousins. Well, House, the market has clearly moved with the Broncos in this spot. They opened the line, Chargers laying 4. It has been bet down. It is now down to 2.5. Massive game for both teams. Like I said, the winner of this game is going to the playoffs. They're going to be set up rather nicely. Denver or the Chargers. Winner of this game is going to the playoffs. Loser, probably going to go, but they're going to have to sweat the final 2 weeks of the year. I'll let you kick it off, House. How do we lean? How do we feel? Broncos plus 2.5 against Harbaugh and the Chargers.
Yeah, it's a very juicy matchup. I really wish the Chargers weren't as banged up as they are. I think it could be really, because we have that great narrative of both of these two teams coming from really out of nowhere. The forecasted combined win total for these two teams was probably 12, 13, 14 combined wins was all that was. Well, no, the Chargers were pretty high up there because of the Harbaugh effect. But I think the Broncos were only anticipated to get to 5. The win total was 5.5. In any event, I don't really like a side here, because the Chargers offense can't be trusted. They have been a bottom 2 offense since Dobbins went out across a bunch of different metrics, and Herbert is hobbled. We don't know, ultimately he's got a whole slew of body ailments that he's dealing with, and I don't like it. Ladd McConkey came back. He was kind of effective, but the blitz from Tampa Bay basically swamped the Chargers. And I mean, what do you think the Broncos are going to do? So the Broncos can win this game with defense, and they're going to have to, because their offense stinks also. Bo Nix had his worst game as a professional against the Indianapolis Colts, and that was kind of alarming if you're a Broncos backer, the way that the secondary for the Colts exploited the daylights. They played zone coverage, and they baited that young man into throwing balls that were so bad. His picks were so bad. Dream and JJ, you both will never be able to forgive the Colts for the way that they gave that game away.
Not at all.
Never.
But it was the Colts game to win, because they had a very good game plan against Bo Nix. So this would be one where I would say, if I was going to pick a side, it would be the Broncos, because their defense is so good and what they're going to be able to do in terms of putting pressure on Herbert. But I don't love it, Dream.
I hate this game. Like, I wanted to fade the Broncos so bad. Yeah. Like, you look at the game last week, they were outgained 310 to 193 against the Colts. They had drives of 15, 35, and a 50-yard fumble return for a score. And the last 4 weeks, they beat the Falcons, Raiders, Browns, and Colts. They were outgained in their last 3 games against the Colts, Browns, and Raiders. I wanted to fade this Broncos team, but I can't, because Justin Herbert is banged up. Top deep threat receiver, Quentin Johnson, he had an ankle injury and didn't participate in practice. You look at Will Disley, he's hurt. You look at their top cornerback, Cam Hart, he suffered concussion against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and right after that, Tampa Bay ran wild. So you have both sides banged up. And, the crazy thing about this game is that you look at the Broncos, they have all of these injury issues. They're missing Riley Moss. And you saw how Jameis Winston and all of these other offenses were able to create explosive plays. Well, Patrick Surtain has a low ankle sprain as well. So everything says bet the Chargers, but they're so banged up. And even if you look at this from a numbers perspective, the first time they played the Broncos, they were laying 3 on the road. Now they're laying 2.5. So that tells you how much these injuries are being priced into the current line. But if these injuries aren't what they say they are, this is a Charger smash spot. But you look at the total, I mean, the total probably says that this is probably a teaser leg on the Broncos, but this is probably a complete stay away from me.
It's a real, really tough game to handicap. I think you guys nailed it. The reason I lean towards Denver in this spot, I can't get out of my head what I saw that Charger defense do a week ago, where they got absolutely destroyed by Baker Mayfield and company. And that is a terrific pass defense for Denver. You mentioned Surtain. I think Raheem, he gives it a go. That's one that you absolutely have to watch come Thursday, because if he doesn't play, it changes a lot for Vance Joseph and what the Broncos are looking to do. I'm kind of at the point, Raheem, where I have faded the Broncos a lot. And I'm annoyed about the fact that I faded the Broncos a lot. I had the Raiders. Remember how that game went. I had the Browns. Remember how that game went. The Colts. Do I need to continue about how frustrating this has been? If I am betting this game, and I'm not sure I'm definitely doing it, but if I am absolutely grabbing the points with the Broncos, because I'm sick and tired of being on the wrong side of the juju. And the other thing is, Raheem, Herbert being out here is a huge, or not being out, Herbert being as banged up as he is, he looked like he could barely move around last week against Tampa Bay. And Denver is going to send a house. They're going to send a whole lot of pressure his way. That's concerning.
Especially on a short week. It's very concerning. So I don't really want to touch this game. I mean, I think, like, as I'm talking through it, you see a low total, 42.5. You see the Broncos at 2.5. I think probably a teaser is the way to go.
As far as the total house, is that something we're thinking about here with the under? Because I think this, despite the struggles of the Charger defense, this game, I think, has gross potential.
I totally agree with you. I mean, the only way I think that this total gets challenged is if there's some pick six action, and I'm not prepared to rule that out. But the last 10 times these teams have played in LA or San Diego, they've gone under 9 of the times. 8 of the last 9 times that these teams have played have gone under 41 points. The Chargers AFC West games this season, 36 points, 39 points, 27 points, 32 points. It's kind of an under smash spot. The only concern would be, the pick six thing. Justin Herbert and Bo Nix both showing unders. The total in the first time these teams played, they got to 39. And last year when they played in LA, it was 37. So to me, it's an under.
Seems like the boys aligned in the under. Raheem, if you had to play this game, you lean Chargers?
I would lean Chargers if I have to play the side. If I have to play a teaser, it's definitely the Broncos. Like that tells you how uncertain I am about this game.
Well, this game reeks of a tease the under up and tease the Broncos up. Joe House, that seems like it's right up your alley.
Yeah, that's my kind of thing. It's dumb, but I'm into it.
I understand that, but
I think the thing that makes this tough as well is the Broncos, they give up so many explosive plays. So it's just like if you got to remember, Herbert had an ankle sprain going into the Broncos game previously, and they won that game by double digits. So it's just, I don't know. Like, this is a game where you watch, you see how healthy are these guys, who's going to be in the lineup, and then you kind of make a decision based off that, because you're going to get more information watching 10 minutes of the game than you are on any of these injury reports, because we know that these teams like to lie.
Interesting. So you're saying, Raheem, this is a good game. Hold off on FanDuel, settle into your couch, let it marinate a little bit, and then hop aboard. I like that.
Yeah, that's the way to go.
Maybe that's the way we end up playing Thursday Night Football. Very, very tricky game. Fascinating game with the Broncos and the Chargers. We got a lot more to get to. We have 2 Saturday games to break down. One of them is a lot more certain compared to the other. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a certain injury at the moment for one Patrick Mahomes. Is he playing? Is he not? We'll get into that. Plus the rest of the card. Can Lamar finally figure out the Pittsburgh Steelers? I have a take. I have a stance. We'll see if the boys are aligned. Ravens, Steelers, Chiefs, Texans. A lot more games to get to. East Coast Bias Boys coming right back. right, gents. 2 Saturday games plus all the college football. I mean, basically, have to make sure I don't get divorced between now and the end of the year. I think a lot of us know exactly what we're talking about here. Hey, ladies, come on board. Watch all football with good old Jay, with good old House, good old Raheem. You can't go wrong there. Raheem, I want to start with Ravens and Steelers. I've been very critical of Lamar Jackson against the Steelers. I think he has a Steelers problem. I have mentioned this multiple times over the last few years. I've thought long and hard about this game. I have a very strong take. I have a very strong stance. I love Baltimore this week. I don't like Baltimore. I absolutely love Baltimore. And I know how stupid that sounds. I understand all of the trends for the Steelers as an underdog. I understand what Mike Tomlin does when he is an underdog. I know Lamar Jackson can't beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. I just think the spot screams Baltimore. They had their bye. They had their warm-up game against the Giants. They kind of basically said, hey, Derrick Henry, we're leaving you in the garage against the Giants. We don't really need you. We are going to rev you up against the Steeler team that played a physical game last week against Philadelphia that showed some warts to me in that game against Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts had his way. Steeler defense has not been as good. And the Steeler offense, without George Pickens, has not been the same. I know it's crazy, Raheem. I think Baltimore by double digits on Saturday. How about that?
So that's where I am too. And I totally agree with you. I think the big thing is that you want to watch the injury report. It appears that TJ Watt was hurt on Sunday. He didn't practice on Tuesday, but he did return in a limited fashion on Wednesday. And we know the Steelers are 1-10 without TJ Watt since TJ Watt joined the Steelers. But also the other big injury is George Pickens. And we know that Russell Wilson likes to throw the ball down the field to George Pickens. And since he's been out of the lineup the last 2 weeks, 26 in EPA per play, 30th in success rate, 35% success rate without George Pickens. So that's been a major issue for the Steelers offense. But I also think the defense isn't necessarily the same. And look, I know they've limited Lamar Jackson. Look, the Ravens, 16 points, 10 points, 10 points, 13 points, 16 points, 13 points, 19 points, and 14 points in the games in which Lamar Jackson has played the Steelers. But I think this week is different. And I agree with you. If Pickens is out of the lineup, I think you smash the Ravens. And I also think you can bet the Ravens to win the AFC North at plus 130, because if they win this game, you got to remember the Steelers got Kansas City coming up. I think the Ravens are in a good position to pass this team.
Yeah, I like that assessment. I'm not prepared to lay all the points. I just can't do it. You know, all of the trends. I won't sit here and go through every single one of them. But, you know, Lamar Jackson is 1-4 straight up, 0-5 against the spread against Tomlin and the Steelers. As an underdog of 4 more points against the Ravens, the Steelers are 8-0 in franchise history. With Tomlin, they're 6-0 against the spread as a dog of more than 3 points against the Ravens. Also, Pittsburgh coming off of a loss, 10-1 against the spread after a loss by 7 or more points. There's a whole batch of additional numbers you could do that talk about how effective Mike Tomlin is against John Harbaugh, how effective the underdog has been in this series between these two teams. But I agree with how compromised the Steelers are, and we just watched it. The way that the Eagles exploited the secondary of the Steelers, and the Eagles were completely nonplussed by the pass rush of the Pittsburgh Steelers. That was supposed to be the strength. It was supposed to be putting Jalen Hurts into uncomfortable positions, disrupting the play calling of the Eagles. None of that came to pass. Speaking of pass, what Jalen Hurts did was come out and complete nearly every ball for 2 touchdowns and 200 yards in the first half and establish the dominance of the Eagles. The Ravens offense is better. I mean, you know, respectfully, all due respect to the Philadelphia Eagles, I think the Ravens offense is better. There have been questions with that offensive line for the Ravens, but my inclination is to just play Baltimore on the money line.
That's
think that they're going to win.
Because I was going to ask you, Pittsburgh's been your dog. They've been your team. I was going to ask if you were taking them outright. And the answer to that question is no.
No. And honestly, I just want to say it on these airwaves. I got bullied into taking Pittsburgh against the Eagles. My preference for the dog on the show on Sunday was Dallas. Dallas was my favorite dog. I said on this show last Thursday how much I like them as a dog, but I got bullied. The Podfather was making fun of me for backing a bad team as a dog, and I said, okay, fine. Pittsburgh was so good to me all season long. It's fine. It's fine. We accept it.
That's a lesson, House. We don't get bullied around here.
It's a lesson.
We definitely don't get bullied.
We don't get bullied around here.
House, you've been hot all season long. Like if you look at your season long win record on picking every game, you've been hot. So you can't let anybody bully you.
Fair enough. I do like Baltimore on the money line. I'm not going to lay the points.
Okay, the other game. It's Houston and Kansas City, and it's very uncertain. So I'm going to keep the analysis kind of vague on this one, House. Can you go near this game knowing if Mahomes is or isn't playing? Like, I have no desire to go anywhere near this game right now. None.
The only thing that I would do is as long as the total is over 40, and I think it's still around 41 and a half.
41 and a half, correct. Yep.
Just play the under. Go ahead and play under because both of these teams have been under teams, and neither one of these teams can score in the second half of games for whatever reason. And maybe that's one way to tackle it. Play the second half under blindly. Go get that number right now with the total at 41 and a half. Go play second half under. I'm at a loss as to what to do until we know what's happening with Mahomes. I guess there might be some incentive to go ahead and grab the Texans plus the 3 points, because if we wake up Saturday morning and they say, you know what, we're going to be cautious with Mahomes, then getting the 3 is good. But who wants to back the Texans? The Texans stink. They've been fraudulent all season long. Dream has been on it. DeBundo's been on it. I don't want to be in that position, but I do like anything with a total at 40 or higher. I feel like the under is a strong play.
So I'm pretty angry about this because I planned on grabbing the 3 with the Kansas City Chiefs, and it was 2.5, 3 when it was believed that Carson Wentz was going to be in. But when you look at Patrick Mahomes, he kind of has that LeBron James type thing. Like, you all guys have watched LeBron James. He'll nick up his ankle, and it looks like he'll have a season-ending or a career-ending injury, and then he comes back the next play. And Mahomes has done that in football for the last couple of years. You'll see him, he'll suffer that crazy knee injury or ankle injury, high ankle sprain, and then he's playing the next week. And he's tough. I think he's tougher than he's given credit for. So it does appear that Patrick Mahomes is going to be out there. Me personally, if he's not out there, I'm betting the Chiefs. And because my model has this game at 5.7 for the Chiefs. They should be 5.5-point favorites. The only reason why this game is 3 is because Patrick Mahomes is injured. So it feels like we're getting some value. So I'm going to wait for the final injury report to come out. If Mahomes is out, I think you can if Mahomes is playing, I think you can lay the 3 safely. And I think if Mahomes is out, you can get even more value on Carson Wentz. I mean, let's be real. This Texans team, from a down-to-down perspective, you're 30th in offensive success rate, 39% success rate. Do we actually believe that the Chiefs with Carson Wentz is going to be that bad? And you can say what you want about Carson Wentz, but he's still being coached by Andy Reid. I think they can have higher than a 39% offensive success rate. And I think they should be able to run the ball, and I think they should be able to win this game. So wait for the final injury report and just play it accordingly. But I think the Chiefs are the side.
Raheem not messing around. And we've known Mahomes to be a guy that all of a sudden hobble out in status when we play, and then sure enough, we see him out there the next week. We got a lot more games to get to, including a juicy one down in the DMV that's coming up right here on East Coast Bias. All right, we got a lot of games to break down for Week 16. House, your team got off to the big lead against the Saints. Saw the Saints come storming back after the quarterback change, survived the 2-point conversion. Massive win. Philadelphia comes to town. You're a small underdog in the game. I feel like you have faded your team every single week. So I got to know, are you fading them again?
I mean, of course. But my first question is, How long is this game going to be? How long does the NFL gonna is this going to be a 60-minute and 10-second game? A 60-minute
59-45. I don't know. We might do that instead.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, and I'm still waiting to see the Sean Hockley punishment. He really should not be refereeing the playoffs. We already went through this. The way that I like this particular matchup, these games between these division rivals are always close. It doesn't really matter, sort of which team is up and which team is down. Philly has been up over the last, half decade or so, although the last time Washington made the playoffs, it was because Philly, did put in a tank job in the last week of the season, and Ron Rivera made the playoffs with this Washington team, with an under 500 Washington team in the bubble days. I am inclined to not want to mess around with 3.5, but I might buy a point. I might buy either a half point or a point. Philly -3 feels right to me. Philly -2.5, which is available on the FanDuel Sportsbook at -148. That feels really right to me. I understand that Philly is going to take this game as serious as they need to. They have an absolute prime opportunity to win out, beating the NFC East, all of their NFC East opponents down the stretch, and go grab that number 1 seed in the NFC and get that bye. And that will be really important to that entire team on both sides of the ball. So I think that they come out and handle their business against Washington. They just have more talent than Washington, and that's not a knock, but these games are close. So I don't want to lay anything over 3.
So my model has this game Eagles -4. The market's at 3.5. It seems like I'm right on market. This is weird because it felt like Jalen Hurts, they said he had a broken finger the other day, and he had his best game of the season, 25 of 32, 290 yards and 2 touchdowns, his best passing game of the season. And then they said that Saquon Barkley is playing through something undisclosed. I don't know what that means. So it feels like there's a lot of weird talk coming out of Philadelphia, and then they still end up performing. I just need to know more at this point in time. I mean, they even just said today that they sent Big Dom and Brandon Graham to Jalen Hurts' house to connect more with the team. So I don't know if, it's WVIP and Philadelphia. They're just creating all these false narratives and they're just angry Philadelphians. But I just don't this team is just so strange to me. So I can't really get a hold of it. My market is on, my model is on market. So I'm probably just staying away from this one.
All right, Raheem, let's see if you're staying away from Minnesota and Seattle. You remember last week, one of the few I got right was Green Bay laying a number. I loved Green Bay in the spot. I thought they'd be ready to go. They won that game from Jump Street. I know the injury report at the moment for Seattle is very up in the air. My gut, I think we're going to see Geno Smith. I do. And this game kind of reeks of season on the line, kitchen sink, throwing everything to the table for the Seattle Seahawks. I know House is invested. I know the Podfather is invested. I'd like it a lot more if I got 3 and the hook. Raheem, I like the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday.
This is tough for me. It just because until I see some definitive news on Geno Smith, I'm not making a play on this.
That's fair.
And
now, what if I tell you Geno Smith is going to play on Sunday?
Even then, I'm right on market for this game as well. I'm at Vikings -3.5. That's exactly where I'm at. So I'm just not seeing a big edge on this game. And it's just, I think this is a frustrating NFL week for me because there's games that I would ordinarily like, but there's injuries. Or there's teams I want to fade, but they end up playing somebody who's injured. So there's just not a lot of stuff on the board this week as far as sides.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would like to go ahead and tip my hat to the NFL schedule makers. They basically told us, go ahead and take Sunday off. I have a lot of Christmas shopping that I need to do. I'm going to do it
you got a show to do at 11 o'clock in the morning first. So you got to do it afterwards.
We'll have our show, and then, I'll watch Washington and Philadelphia, and hopefully that won't be a blowout. I get an early start. But Sunday afternoon, 4 o'clock, I'm gone. I'm there. I'm not watching any of those football games. I have no interest in them. But this Minnesota Seattle game, I can't unsee that Seattle offense. And the Seattle offense has not been good for several weeks now. They've been winning with defense, and it's been a good defense. They got exploited. I mean, we had what feels like to me a small sample size with the Seattle defense, where they played Arizona very well twice, and really, limited them. They had another good win in there against another sort of offense that's not very formidable. And then they got their pants pulled down on national TV, that defense by Green Bay, and an excellent, play calling by LaFleur. I think Kevin O'Connell is onto it, up to it, and I just can't trust that Seattle offense with or without Geno. This number will go to what, Dream? 7.5 if it's declared that Geno's out. Sam Howell was abysmal.
He stinks. He's out on this game. If I see Sam Howell, I'm immediately buying out of it. So right. That my counter with that game, Raheem, is Geno Smith playing, and I like Seattle. I want to make that clear.
Okay. Yeah, Sam Howell, he led the league in sacks last year. He was getting sacked at a level of like David Carr. like record-breaking levels of taking sacks. You can't back that guy at all. And I just didn't like the way Seattle looked last week. I know you shouldn't be a prisoner of the moment, but they got pushed around by the Packers. And I think, KLC over there in Minnesota, he's just as good as a play caller as, my guy over there in Green Bay. So I'm a little scarred.
Finally, boys, Sunday Night Football. Good game, because Dallas all of a sudden looks resurgent. Tampa Bay and Baker Mayfield have been one of the best stories in the NFL this year. You can move it on that Tampa team, though, Raheem. 4 seems hefty. Later
points with Tampa. Last week, the Carolina Panthers, they took money against the Dallas Cowboys. They closed 2.5-point favorites. I know you got a venue switch. You got Tampa Bay on the road, but Dallas doesn't play well at home.
Awful.
Not only are they awful at home, you got Tampa Bay in a dome on a fast track, and that offense has been rolling.
I might be inclined to play an over here, but I've been impressed by Dallas. They're really like one dumb special teams play away from being legit, like making a legit playoff run.
Yeah, really in this thing. Crazy.
And honestly, it's the defense. The defense has improved.
Let me ask you guys a question. Who would you say is the better team, Cincinnati or Tampa Bay?
I'm the wrong person to answer him, because I think if Cincinnati got in the playoffs in the AFC, they could actually beat Buffalo or Kansas City. I know. I'm still on that. Still dying on that hill.
I cannot, under any circumstances, give any credit to Cincinnati. They can't stop anybody. Anybody. It's the worst, defensive performance. They've had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to step up and show some toughness, and they don't have it. They can't do it.
So I asked that question for a reason, because Cincinnati was laying 6 to Dallas on the road. Tampa Bay's laying 3.5. Are you telling me that Cincinnati is that much better than Tampa?
No,
I'm not.
So, and that's where I have to lay points with Tampa Bay.
Right.
Understood. Very compelling case. And the Cowboys at home have been as bad a bet as you can find in the NFL. We'll come back. We'll wrap it up with plays for Week 16. And I gave the guys a homework assignment. The college football playoff is this weekend. I want one pick from Raheem and House in addition to what we give in the NFL. So we'll see if we have some winners. Best bet time. Now, we have all the NFL, but to be honest, I'm more excited for the college this weekend. Indiana is a 7.5-point dog against Notre Dame on Friday night. Penn State's laying 8.5 against SMU. Is very happy to be there. Clemson, big dog against Texas, getting 12 at the moment. And Ohio State laying 7.5 against the spunky Tennessee team. House, in addition to your NFL best bet, I gave you a homework assignment. I know you do your homework. I know you were a good student back in the day at Holy Cross. What do you got for me, buddy?
Yeah, I'm excited for this college football playoff. I don't mess around with college very often, but this format with these teams hosting playoff games, I think it's going to be absolutely bananas. And there is a teaser. You could do 3 legs, but I'm going to just be conservative and do 2 legs here. I absolutely adore grabbing Notre Dame from the 7.5 down to 1.5 against Indiana and putting that together with Penn State who is a 8.5 point favorite. Let's pull them down to 2.5. We're asking Notre Dame to win by a field goal and Penn State to win by a field goal. They should have enormous advantages, both in terms of the quality of the program, but also this new home field advantage, right? Isn't that what we're looking at here?
And hideous weather, might I add, in South Bend. And SMU House, a Texas team coming up to play in Happy Valley. It's going to be like 25 degrees.
I love it. Real home field advantage with real stakes in college football. Let's go.
I'm going to go ahead and take Clemson plus 12. I don't believe that Texas is starting their best quarterback on the roster. I don't trust Quinn Ewers in big games. So I'm gonna take the points.
I'm taking Notre Dame laying 7.5 against Indiana. I know Indiana was a feel-good story in college football all year. That Marcus Freeman team is physical, and I think we've seen that basically all year. They've been covering these games and covering by a consistent margin. House, I love the tease that you threw in. If I had to give you a dog, I would never in a million years lay points with a Ryan Day coach team. Ryan Day and Ohio State are laying 7.5 against Tennessee. I know public is going to fade the Buckeyes here, but I'm siding with the public here. I'd take Tennessee, and I'm not going to be stunned if Tennessee goes in there and wins that game outright. I know it's hostile environment, crazed environment, but the Buckeye fan is kind of out on this team, and that crowd could get ugly if they get off to a bad start. So I'm going to take Tennessee plus the points. I am also going to take Notre Dame and lay the points. Now, before we say goodbye, guys, I need a best bet for the NFL. Raheem.
All right, I got two. We're going to go with the New York Jets, Los Angeles Rams, over 46.5. If you look at the New York Jets offense since week 11, 11th in EPA per play. But the defense is also abysmal right now. I mean, they've gone from 17th in EPA per play to 27th in EPA per play. They could barely stop Mac Jones last week. And I think Aaron Rodgers is looking the best he's looked in quite some time. I think this could be a shootout. So let's go over there. And then next, let's go to boxing. Bill Simmons will love this. Podfather, I know you're listening to this and you agree with me. We're going to go with Alexander Usyk on the money line, minus 154 against Tyson Fury in the rematch. We bet Usyk in the first one. We're going to bet him again. So that's my best bets.
I love this Usyk. Might have to add it to my money line parlay. I'm just grabbing two teams that have so much at stake that are showing us the two of the very best offenses in the NFL. I think we're learning at this stage of the season, just go ahead and gamble on the offenses. Philadelphia Eagles over Washington on the money line. Baltimore Ravens at home over Pittsburgh on the money line. Those two legs together, plus 109. I might add some Usyk to it just to juice it up, though.
I got three quickly. Jets getting smoked this week. That defense, to Raheem's point, couldn't stop Mac Jones. McVay is money in December. Rams, everything to play for. Hammer the Rams. 3, if you can get it at FanDuel, get it now. Detroit, I know what happened on Thanksgiving. That is going to be an angry, ticked-off team. They have everything to play for. The Bears are cooked. I'm laying it with the Lions. And then last but not least, getting on the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer train. Guys, the Colts stink. Their season is done. I am taking the Tennessee Titans plus 3.5. Hey, Rudolph, Christmas, we're in the spirit. What can I say? We're back for the Ringer Sunday pregame. For House, Raheem, JJ signing off. Be good, everybody.